This wasn't the man who touched her like she might disappear. This was the husband she'd been demanding to meet. He kicked the bedroom door open, and lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the sparse room in stark white light. The bed they'd shared so many nights, while keeping oceans between them. The dresser where she kept her few possessions. The mirror that had reflected her tears more times than she could count. Garrett set her down beside the bed, and his hands moved to finish unbuttoning her dress with a deliberateness that made her breath catch. "I want to see all of you," he said, his voice low. "Not just your body. I want to see who you really are, what you're really feeling. No more hiding for either of us." Nora's dress fell to the floor, and she stood before him in just her chemise and petticoats. But instead of feeling vulnerable, she felt powerful. The giant mail-order bride had spent her whole life being told she was too tall, too strong, too much. Her mother had despaired of ever finding her a husband. The scandal in Boston had confirmed everyone's worst assumptions about women who didn't fit the mold, but the way Garrett looked at her now, like she was everything he'd ever wanted and been too afraid to ask. Or made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. "Your turn," she said, reaching for his shirt buttons. Her fingers worked quickly, revealing the scarred chest beneath. Battle wounds from the war. A burn from a branding iron. The physical map of a hard life lived without softness. She traced one particularly nasty scar that ran from his collarbone to his ribs. "Tell me about this one." "Shrapnel. Battle of Stones River." His hands covered hers. "I don't want to talk about war right now, Nora." "Then what do you want to talk about?" "This." He pulled her against him, skin to skin, and the contact made them both gasp. "I want to talk about how I've been dying every night lying next to you and not being able to touch you the way I needed to. How I'd wait until you were asleep just so I could hold you without having to explain why my hands were shaking." His voice dropped to a whisper. "How many times I almost broke, almost said to hell with protecting you and just took what I wanted." The giant mail-order bride felt heat flood through her. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was a coward." Garrett's hands moved up her back, pulling her impossibly closer. "Because I convinced myself that holding back was noble when really it was just fear." He kissed her neck, her jaw, her lips. "But I'm done being afraid, Nora. You asked for all of me, and I'm going to give it to you. Even if it terrifies me, even if I don't know how this ends." They fell onto the bed together, and this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. The rancher kissed his wife like he was trying to memorize the taste of her, and the giant mail-order bride met him with equal hunger. 3 months of denial and longing poured out in touches that were almost desperate, almost rough, but never cruel. This was passion without pretense, need without shame. "Tell me what you want," Garrett breathed against her ear. "Tell me what you need from me." "Honesty," Nora gasped, as his hands explored places he'd only touched tentatively before. "I need you to stop performing and start feeling. Stop trying to be what you think I need and just be who you are." The rancher pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes she saw everything he'd been hiding. The intensity, the hunger, the depth of feeling that had scared him so badly he'd tried to bury it. "What if who I am is too much? Then I'll tell you." She pulled him back down. "That's what partners do, Garrett. They trust each other enough to be honest. They don't decide alone what the other person can handle." Something broke loose in the rancher then, some final chain that had been holding him back. He made love to his wife with an honesty that left them both shaking, both gasping, both finally connected in the way they should have been from the start. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together with the storm still raging outside, Garrett did something he hadn't done since the war. He cried, not silent tears this time, but deep wrenching sobs that shook his entire frame. 9 years of grief and guilt and loneliness pouring out while Nora held him, her own tears mixing with his. The giant mail-order bride wrapped her strong arms around her broken husband and let him fall apart, because that's what he needed. Not someone to fix him, someone to hold him while he finally felt everything he'd been running from. "I'm sorry," Garrett choked out. "I'm so sorry, don't." Nora's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare apologize for being human, for feeling things, for trusting me enough to let me see you like this." She kissed his forehead, his wet cheeks, his trembling lips. "This is what I wanted, Garrett. Not the rancher who has everything together. The man who's brave enough to fall apart." Dawn broke over the Wyoming ranch in shades of gold and pink, the storm having passed in the night. Garrett woke first, and for a moment he lay perfectly still, afraid to move. Afraid this was a dream. Afraid he'd open his eyes and find himself back in the half-life he'd been living for 9 years. But then Nora shifted against him, her copper hair spilling across his chest, her breathing deep and even, and he knew it was real. The giant mail-order bride was still here. Still his. And he'd finally let her in. Garrett's hand moved to stroke her hair, the gesture tender in a way he'd never allowed himself before. Last night had cracked something open inside him, something he'd thought was dead. He'd cried in her arms like a child, told her things he'd never told anyone, showed her the parts of himself he'd been convinced would drive her away. And she'd stayed, more than stayed. She'd held him through it all, and told him he was brave for breaking. Nora's eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then a smile curved her lips, small at first, then growing wider. "You're still here," she said softly. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know." "The barn, maybe. Running away from what happened last night?" Her hand rested on his chest, over his heart. "You have a habit of doing that." The rancher covered her hand with his. "Not anymore." His voice was rough from sleep and emotion. "I'm done running, Nora, from you, from this, from whatever the hell we're building here." The giant mail-order bride pushed herself up on one elbow, studying his face. "You mean that?" "Because I need you to mean it, Garrett. I can't do last night over and over. I can't keep tearing down walls just to watch you build them back up. I mean it." He sat up, pulling her with him, so they faced each other in the early morning light. "Last night you said something that I can't stop thinking about. You said I was brave for breaking. And I realized I've spent 9 years thinking strength meant never falling apart, never needing anyone, never admitting I couldn't handle something alone." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But you're the strongest person I know, and you asked me for help last night. Asked me to meet you halfway. And that took more courage than anything I did in the war." Nora's eyes glistened with fresh tears. "Garrett, let me finish." He took a shaky breath. "I want to take you to the hillside today, to Sarah and James. I want you to meet them properly. Not as the woman I'm replacing them with, but as my wife. As the person I'm choosing to build a life with." His voice cracked. "And I want to tell them I'm sorry for holding on so long. Sorry for using their memory as an excuse to stay dead inside. And that I'm going to try to do better. To be better. For you." The giant mail-order bride threw her arms around the rancher's neck, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, I want that." She pulled back to look at him. "And I want to tell you something, too, about Boston. About why I really left." Garrett tensed slightly. "You told me. The scandal, that's not all of it." Nora took a breath. "The man who attacked me, my employer, he told everyone I seduced him. That I was trying to trap him into marriage. And my own mother believed him. My own father threw me out." Her voice shook. "I didn't just leave Boston because I was ruined. I left because my family chose his lie over my truth. And I've been terrified that one day you'd look at me and see what they saw. A woman who's too much. Too tall, too strong, too difficult to love." The rancher's hands framed her face. "You listen to me, Nora Dalton. I see a woman who crossed 1,000 miles alone to start over, who works harder than most men I know, who was strong enough to demand I stop hiding and brave enough to hold me when I fell apart." His forehead pressed against hers. "And if your family couldn't see how magnificent you are, that's their loss, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I almost lost you, because I was too scared to admit it." They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing together, letting the weight of everything they'd been through settle between them. Not as a burden this time, but as a foundation. The hard things they'd survived, the walls they'd torn down, the truth they'd finally had the courage to speak. "So what now?" Nora asked quietly. "Where do we go from here?" Garrett smiled. really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. Now we get dressed, have breakfast, go talk to my first family, so I can finally let them rest in peace. He kissed her softly. And then we start building our life, the real one. No more half measures, no more holding back, just you and me and whatever comes next. It won't be easy, Nora warned. We're both stubborn, both damaged, both used to doing things our own way. Good. The rancher pulled her to her feet. Easy was never going to work for us anyway. We need hard, we need real, we need something worth fighting for. The giant mail-order bride laughed, and the sound filled the bedroom like sunlight. Then let's make it harder, every single day, for the rest of our lives. They dressed together, stealing kisses and touches that felt different now, lighter, freer. The weight of secrets and shame lifted. When they walked out of the bedroom hand in hand, Tomas was already in the kitchen making coffee. The old ranch hand took one look at them and grinned. "About time, boss," he said in his accented English. "About damn time," Garrett laughed, actually laughed, and pulled Nora closer. "Yeah, it is." They ate breakfast together, the three of them, talking about the storm damage and what needed fixing. But there was something new in the conversation, a lightness, a sense that this house was finally a home, instead of just a place where broken people hid from their pain. After breakfast, Garrett and Nora walked up the hillside to the two wooden crosses. The morning sun was warm on their backs, and wildflowers had started to bloom after the storm. Nora hung back slightly, letting the rancher approach first. "Sarah, James." Garrett's voice was steady. "I want you to meet Nora, my wife." He reached back, and the giant mail-order bride took his hand, stepping up beside him. "She's nothing like you, Sarah. She's strong where you were gentle, fierce where you were soft. And I love her. Not as a replacement for you, but as herself. As the partner I needed, but was too scared to find." His throat tightened, but he pushed through. "I'm sorry I held on so long. Sorry I used your memory as armor against feeling anything real. But I'm letting go now. I'm choosing to live. And I hope, wherever you are, you're okay with that. I hope you've found peace. Because I finally have." Nora squeezed his hand, her own tears falling freely. "I'll take care of him," she said to the graves. "I promise. And I'll never try to erase you. You'll always be part of his story. Part of our story." They stood there together as the sun climbed higher, and slowly Garrett felt the last of the weight lift from his shoulders. The guilt, the shame, the fear. It didn't disappear completely. He knew it never would. But it became manageable, became something he could carry without it crushing him, because he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. When they walked back down the hillside, the rancher pulled his wife close and kissed her in the bright morning light. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me, for demanding better, for being brave enough to make it harder." "Always," Nora said and smiled. "That's what love is, Garrett. Choosing the hard thing. Together, every single day, and they did. For the rest of their lives, they chose each other. Through drought and prosperity, through loss and joy, through all the hard, beautiful, messy reality of building something real. The rancher and his giant mail-order bride became partners in every sense of the word, equals who challenged each other, held each other and loved each other with an honesty that made them both stronger. And on quiet mornings, when Garrett woke before dawn and watched his wife sleeping beside him, he whispered the same prayer of gratitude. For the woman brave enough to demand he stop hiding, for the love that had saved them both, for the life they'd built from broken pieces. It was harder than he'd ever imagined. And it was worth every single moment. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? We love hearing from our community around the world. Drop your location and the time, and let's build something beautiful together. Just like Garrett and Nora did. One brave choice at a time.